The top story on ABC News Breakfast, the federal opposition says suspending backbench MP Craig Thomson from the Labor Party won't end the crisis that's consuming the government. The Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, suspended Mr Thomson in a bid to restore public confidence in the Parliament.
Now, Mr Thomson is moving to the crossbenches but says he'll still vote with the government. The opposition says the Prime Minister should now refuse to accept his support, but Julia Gillard says she is acting in the best interests of the Parliament.
In all the circumstances here, what I've endeavoured to do is make a judgment about what is right. We've got to uphold respect for the Parliament. We've also got to understand the presumption of innocence. My job as Prime Minister of the nation is to make the best possible judgment call about what enables respect for the Parliament. I do believe a line has been crossed here, and because a line has been crossed, I've acted.
Julia Gillard, the political correspondent Melissa Clark, joins us now from Canberra. Melissa, good morning to you. This is all about, according to the PM, removing what she said were the dark clouds over the federal parliament. The big question this week is whether it will.
And that's certainly not clear because the Prime Minister, on returning from a week overseas, coming back, clearly getting a different sense being back on home soil than she did from overseas, has moved both Craig Thomson and put some distance between the Labor Party and him, asking him and him agreeing to suspend his ALP membership and sit on the crossbenches and not take part in the Labor caucus, and also with Peter Slipper asking him to remain standing aside from the Speaker's role for a bit longer. But that decision, as much as it has been welcomed by many on multiple sides of politics, some in her own party are quite pleased that there's been some action taken. Others in the Parliament are also pleased with the outcome. But it's almost raised more questions than it's answered, because now Julia Gillard is facing questions about judgment, about why this was done now and not a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, 6 months ago, when it comes to the Thomson side of things at least. So that renews a whole new range of questions for Julia Gillard, even if it helps steady things somewhat in a day-to-day news cycle sense for the federal government. But the opposition certainly isn't going to let it ease up on the federal government at all. Tony Abbott saying that because the Labor Party will still get Craig Thomson's vote, even though he sits on the crossbenches from this point forth, he says that means the government's still relying on his vote, and therefore the issue hasn't really been dealt with by Julia Gillard. Here's him speaking yesterday.
But nothing that she said today has resolved the crisis which is now enveloping her government. In fact, by saying what she said and doing what she's done today, the Prime Minister has confirmed that there is a crisis consuming the government, but she hasn't resolved it.
Tony Abbott there, and what we see is really something of a status quo that will flow on from here, at least when it comes to the actual machinations of Parliament, because even with Craig Thomson on the crossbench, as we said, he'll still most vote with Labor Party most of, if not all of the time. And of course, even though having Peter Slipper stay aside means that a Labor MP and the Deputy Speaker, Anna Burke, takes the Speaker's chair, she still gets the casting vote if it comes down to that. So the government should still be able to get its bills through Parliament, but it just means it's going to have to tread a lot more carefully.
And also the arithmetic obviously is still very much in the government's way. But what the Prime Minister has to do, as opposed to convincing voters that this dark cloud is removing and she's taking firm action to resolve the situation, she has to convince her own possibly increasingly nervous backbench.
And that start, of course, is already showing how difficult it is, because there are a few questions raised within her own party about her judgment, and that inevitably brings back leadership questions, because so many on the backbench are concerned about how the Labor Party is polling, that they are so far behind the coalition on both primary voter and two-party preferred. So as soon as something is unclear or is unsettled, or in this case as controversial as it has been over the last few weeks, it inevitably raises a few eyebrows about the leadership question. And whilst there's certainly not any moves against Julia Gillard in that sense, it shows there's certainly some unhappiness within the ALP about how this scenario has been managed, and it shows the difficulty that Julia Gillard has had in getting clear air for the government. And this action that we've had over the weekend is certainly about trying to get clear air. The government will be hoping that this means that next week's budget actually gets some attention, rather than all the focus being on Peter Peter Slipper and Craig Thomson as it might otherwise have been on Tuesday when Parliament reconvenes.
OK, Melissa Clark in Canberra, thank you.